Hello, and welcome to the Physical Therapy Owners Club podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Shields. And today I've got Joey Albritton, soon to be physical therapist and founder of the PT Marketing Secrets Company, a social media marketing agency. Well, I'll let you explain what you guys do. I don't even know if social media marketing agency is the right title, but thanks for coming on, Joey. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Yeah, I don't know if I would technically classify myself as a social media management kind of that type agency. I kind of actually go away from that title as much as possible
Oh,
when it
yeah.
comes to like agency, because typically there's a lot of kind of bad connotations behind that.
That's true.
Um, so I guess more what I aim for is a business consultant who happens to actually do Facebook
There you
ads and some of
go.
the other stuff.
There you go. There
Because
you
you really
go.
can't have one without the other.
Awesome. Well, thanks for correcting me on that. I just don't know how to categorize that. But anyways, I'm excited to bring Joey on because I've had coaching clients that have worked with him. I have followed his Facebook group and recognized the kind of work that he's putting out. He's doing a lot of good stuff on Facebook marketing ads and for physical therapists specifically. And so, first of all, thanks for coming on, Joey. I appreciate you taking the time to share your wisdom.
Yeah, not a
And
problem, man.
love for you to share a little bit about what got you into this, and a little bit about your background and what you're doing.
Okay, I definitely did a very long roundabout way to get where I am. So I started biomedical science degree thinking, okay, I'm going to be a dentist. Applied to dental school 3 times, didn't get in. Didn't realize how competitive it was. Slash
Wow.
freshman year wasn't quite as focused as I probably should have been. And so I was like, okay, I like dentistry. Let's do dental hygiene. Like we're kind of in that same boat. We get to work with people, get to help people, everything like that. So went back, got another bachelor's in dental hygiene, did it for 4 years, realized, holy crap, this is awful. So no one wants to be at the dentist. No one actually wants to be there at all. And it's really rough on your body having to do the same thing over and over and over. And really there's like a cap of kind of where you can be. And so I was like, okay, like I've got to find something else. And so essentially I was like, what other healthcare professions can actually see people on a one-to-one basis? And you can still essentially have uncapped potential. And I was like, okay, well, there has to be some type of business owner role with it. So I was like, okay, that already eliminated quite a bit of potential things. So it's like nursing's out of the way and all those. And then when you actually start looking at the ones that only see people one-on-one, like there's not very many, or your volumes through the roof, which there's still some PT clinics where volumes through the roof, as we know. But I was like, okay, so let's try this PT thing. But if I'm going to do it, I was like, I'd really want to do the whole cash-based thing. So, because I saw where insurance is trending, which I mean, now that I'm more knowledgeable, I see that insurance still can work. And actually, if I was to start a practice, I'd have a really hard time not taking a couple insurances.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, okay, well, everyone and their mother tells me that you're not going to get referrals if you're cash based. So I've got to learn this marketing thing. And so I was like, where do I start? And there's a couple like big podcasts out there like Jared Carter and Paul Goff, and I kind of got into them.
Sure.
And all of them are just talking about like direct to consumer marketing. So I was like, well, how do I do it though? And so I kind of lucked into it initially. It was me hopping into, at the time, I think it was called Healthcare Digital Marketing. So Alex Ingar and Will Boyd, their group, back when there was only like 400 people in there. And they were kind of doing this. They had just graduated PT school. They started doing marketing for PTs, but they needed an intern because they were growing too quick.
Oh,
so I was like, oh, okay. Like someone's going to teach me how to do this stuff. Like, and I'm not going to actually have to pay for it. Cool. This is all, I'm going to go all in here. And so they kind of taught me the fundamentals of like a landing page. Like I didn't even know like what a landing page was or who Russell Brunson was of ClickFunnels. Like I was so far removed. Like my only thing I really knew about was like affiliate marketing. So like at the time I was actually building a website on trying to sell toothbrushes to make side money. Cause I was just like trying to find ways to make money just cause like it's always interested me to essentially build your own business.
Yeah.
And so I learned just enough to pretty much be able to tell someone, yeah, I've taken a course on it. Like, I don't know if it's going to work. But someone reached out to me. They're like, hey, do you know how to do this? And the actual first thing I did was actually build a course on plantar fasciitis for a client. And he did that. Didn't really put in the time that we needed to actually grow something like that, because turns out if you build a product, you actually have to get people to come to it. Doesn't matter how good it is.
Yeah.
That's a good lesson to learn for anybody who's trying to make a digital product of something. Like, see what people want first, then build it. And then he's like, hey, do you know how to do these Facebook ads? I was like, I mean, I've taken a course on it. And so that kind of seemed to be the theme, is like, yeah, well, I mean, I kind of know it. Like, do you trust me? I'll trust you. Let's try it. And so we did it. I mean, I still have that client from over 3 years ago, and we're still working together with Facebook ads. And it just kind of one snowballed into another, into another, and into another. And I mean, it went from like the month before starting PT school to me like working with one person to like going all the way through PT school, and now we're working with dozens of people. So it's been a definitely a change of plans potentially when it comes to me actually going into the full physical therapy space myself, as far as being a PT, because I found out how much I love this, and just how much it really like goes in with everything that I love doing. So roundabout way of getting there, but I'm here. And I'm glad we went that route, because there's a lot of stuff that I learned even from the dental side of things, as far as sales, marketing, running a business, all that type stuff. It's been crazy what you don't realize you're learning along the way. And then it's like, oh, dang, I didn't realize that this owner that I was working with was so dang good at what she was doing. Like, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, it's really cool to see that you've kind of grown in your knowledge and expertise with Facebook marketing ads as the physical therapy industry has started to get into it a little bit more as well. We're generally, as a profession, behind the curve. A few years to a decade when it comes to a lot of innovation, right? And so you've had 3 years of experience now, and especially with the pandemic, we're at a flexion point in our industry where it's so vital to go direct to consumer, either because we have to, or there's just greater opportunity. And there is greater opportunity, but physical therapists are finally tapping into that. And I think that can be really tough for physical therapists to trust, to figure out, to know how to start, to, like, where do they begin? How do I find the right person? There's tons of people out there who would tell me they're social media experts, right? So that's what we want to talk a little bit about on the episode today, is like, how does someone go about finding reputable / good? I mean, how do you find someone who can help you with your social media marketing efforts, if that's a direction you want to go?
Yeah, and I think it is some muddy waters that you kind of have to go through, because there's literally no barrier for someone to then essentially call themselves a marketer. Like, if you have a laptop and internet and you've watched a Tai Lopez video or something like that, like, you now all of a sudden think that you're a marketer. And like, even looking back on what I did 3 years ago, I would honestly just laugh at what I used to think was actually considered marketing. And so there is like a night and day difference in between someone who truly knows what they're doing and someone who's been in it, done it for a while, and niched down on it. And I think that the more educated you can be on this, essentially the easier time you're going to have picking someone. So really, I mean, a lot of it, the number one thing I would say is make sure you find someone who's actually niched down into your actual niche.
Into physical therapy?
Yeah, because I know several marketers who have tried to get into physical therapy, and because they were like working with med spas, or they were working with dentists, and then they try to get into it. And then you see them here for a month, and then all of a sudden they're switching to a new niche because they couldn't get it to work. Or you get like someone who's local, which a lot of people, that's what they end up going to, is like, okay, let's find someone local so I can actually talk to them, have a good communication with them, which there's definitely nothing wrong with that, because you should have good communication with the person you're working with. But typically they don't essentially know what offers of work. They haven't had the time to really spend and really test, because over time you have to test it. But that's essentially what you're paying someone who's been doing it for a long time, is to not have to make those same mistakes, because they've already seen what does and doesn't work. But for someone who's first getting into it, like, you may not know what's good and what's bad, what's worked and what hasn't. And that's honestly that's why I have the Facebook group that I have, is so that I can continue to educate people, because the more educated someone is, they can actually come to the table with the actual knowledge that they need.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise someone can really just swindle away pretty much all of their money, and then they're left sitting there wondering like, well, why didn't this work? Because I'm sure,
Mm-hmm.
as most people here have seen, there's all the people that are guaranteeing 15, 30 new patients in your door a month. But when you actually start to go look at the fine print of it, it's like, the number one question you need to ask everybody is, what is a new patient to you?
Uh-huh.
Because a new patient may mean a lead. A new patient may mean someone's signing up for an appointment that never shows, or something like that, or their guarantee is based around stuff that is very, I mean, to be honest, it's sketchy.
Mm-hmm.
It's them saying you've got to follow up with everybody in a minimum of 5 minutes, otherwise your guarantee is void.
Oh, wow.
All kinds of things like that, because they essentially are leveraging a guarantee to try to mitigate risk for someone to make these purchases, which there's ways to mitigate risk to where people can actually trust you. Just be a good person, actually deliver. And if you can't deliver results, refund someone.
Yeah.
You don't need all the legal mumbo jumbo of all that.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that's what a lot of these people were taught by all of the same guy. Like most people have gone through the same agency program, and that's what he's taught. And that's what he's done in the chiropractic space for a long time. So
Oh, okay.
he taught people that, and it's worked, but it's only worked for the ones that essentially have been able to deliver results.
Mm-hmm.
And the physical therapist is sitting there left wondering, well, which is the one that I can actually deliver results?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it is tough. But so essentially finding someone who's worked with physical therapists before, finding someone that can actually show you actual proof of the ROI, because there's a lot of people who don't do good tracking, which you should have. Like
Mm-hmm.
at this day and age, like there's no reason to not have tracking of, we put X amount of dollars in, we got X amount of dollars out. Like
Mm-hmm.
it should be very granular at this point, instead of being based on emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Because really numbers should guide you in literally everything in business. I know you're a big numbers guy. I know you're a
Oh,
big
yeah.
systems guy.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have that. And then realistically, just finding someone who you know is already doing it with someone, or maybe themselves, and then asking who they're using.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But with the contingency that knowing that they may or may not be getting a kickback from that agency.
Oh, okay.
Because one of the common things in a lot of these agencies is, like, say they're charging $1,500 a month. Well, for every person they refer, they get $500 a month recurring. Of course, even if it's just okay results, if they refer 3 people, their stuff is covered.
Yeah.
And I'm not against doing some type of referral incentive, but know that there could be some other type of agenda on the back end of the person who is referring. So definitely talk to people that you trust, because you can be misled very easily, unfortunately.
Yeah. A few years ago, I think my mindset, and many owners possibly even nowadays, might be that, okay, I'll bring on someone younger who knows social media, right? And they'll figure it out, in air quotes, and they'll be cheaper. Maybe it's even someone who graduated with a marketing degree, right?
Yeah.
And so you just assume that they're going to be able to do well. And based on your conversation, your recommendations now, maybe that's not a bad idea, but maybe, and tell me if you've used this in the past, have many owners used someone like that as a liaison to you, and what you do, so it's not you speaking to the owner all the time? Because you tell me that you should be communicating with your social media marketing person probably at least a couple times a week, and that could be a lot of strain on an owner.
Yeah. And a lot kind of depends on kind of how long they've been doing it, kind of where they are in their business and everything like that. And really that communication cycle will change as you work with someone longer and longer.
Okay.
Because like for me, I have 2 options how I work with people. There's some people who absolutely want completely hands off. They don't touch a thing. And essentially the only thing that we do is talk back and forth of, hey, how's this going? How can we improve the actual sales process? So maybe it's on the phone. Maybe we're having struggles actually getting people to schedule for an eval. Like that's typically what the main conversation is, and then keeping their front desk in check because maybe they're not following up as much. And having ways to keep them accountable, which a lot of people like don't really realize their front desk may be causing them to lose several $1,000s.
Yeah.
But that's definitely something you need to think about. But then what I've kind of transitioned to for a lot of my clients is kind of really exactly what you're talking about. Essentially, we set everything up, we run it for 3 months, and then from there, give them the keys to essentially take it all in house.
That's
So
cool.
we have people who hire a specific marketing person, especially like our in network guys. A lot of them have a person who does like their actual network marketing.
Sure.
And so they've essentially tacked that on to their role. Um,
Hmm.
what I don't love seeing is when someone tries to tack on marketing, doing Facebook ads on top of a front desk person's
Oof.
stuff, because they are already so slammed that like don't give them extra stuff. Um, but yeah, so we have done that where we work specifically with someone within their company. There's some business owners when they're first starting out, they do it. And I think that realistically, that's how most business owners need to kind of get to eventually. They're going
Mm.
to be inside the point of they're treating patients. Eventually they'll hire, they'll get staff under them. But eventually the business owner has to step out long enough
Yeah.
to where they can start thinking of themselves as a marketer, because
Okay.
ultimately marketing is going to be the number one driver. Marketing, and then of course retention and referrals, but in my
Yeah.
opinion a lot of that's marketing, and marketing and sales. And so you have to make that transition, and that doesn't mean that they have to be in the day to day where they're the ones doing it, but they have to make that transition out of let's focus day to day. This is what our patient care looks like. We're kind of focusing on one day, and then really scale things out and thinking, okay, as a business owner and as a potential marketer, how do I actually continue to grow this and not get in my own way?
Hmm.
And I think that is a hard transition for a lot of PTs to make, because it's constantly getting pulled back into the weeds of everything
Sure.
and not having the systems to allow them to step away. Once
Hmm.
again, that's essentially what you provide with a lot of what you do, is
That's right.
because it allows them to actually be able to essentially not just own a job, but own a business.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's really tough to make that transition. But as soon as someone does, those are the ones that I see night and day difference, even with the same exact ads from 1 month to them stepping out and then doing it. They're like, oh, well, I actually have time to see what's been going on here. Like
Wow.
it's very interesting when people truly have the time to see what's going on in all facets of their business, how it's able to really expedite everything.
And so you've really seen that over the past 3 years that some owners just aren't ready to
Yeah.
take on something like this. Would you say? I mean,
Yeah.
tell me, you shared a little bit about it, but is there anything more you can say as to what stage does an owner really need to be in order to make this perfect or make it run well?
I think so. I've kind of had a range of people. So we have some who are sole practitioners, don't have a front desk, whether they're working inside a gym somewhere, whether they're doing mobile concierge, or maybe just starting out. Like some of those can make it work. A lot of that depends on really kind of what their caseload already looks like and kind of what their goals
Okay.
are. Because there's some people that inherently what they really need is better systems in their business. They need to essentially build out some of the basics and work on really trying to build their referral sources and increase their actual sales conversion from the
Okay.
get-go.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of people that don't have a systemized sales cycle, and then they wonder why whenever we start to flood them with leads, what's going on? We're not closing these people. Well, they're not referrals, so of course they're not lay down sales. You actually have to have a little bit of a sales system so you can actually diagnose where in the process it goes away.
Mm, okay.
And so I think a systemized sales system is probably one of the number one things that needs to be there. I think a front desk person is nice to have, as far as being able to follow up with these leads, but I don't think it's really necessary.
Mm,
People can make it work till at least they can essentially afford to hire someone. But most people can afford to hire one much sooner when they see how much money they're losing by not having one.
exactly.
Like we're not even going to go down the Jerry Durham route of front desk and how important all that. Like it's ridiculous how
It's
much
vital.
money is being wasted. Because a lot of people look at essentially how much money does it cost to hire one versus how much they're losing, and when you really put those two together, it's like, yeah, you probably should have hired a year ago. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, so most people, like realistically, as far as like a sole practitioner, I typically like to see someone that's at least at the $15,000 a month mark.
Mhm.
That just seems to be someone who has a good enough caseload on their own. They're not stressing over the fact of, hey, we're actually putting some money into our business. Um, and they're able to kind of handle that a little bit more.
Mhm.
The ones that are a little bit lower than that, they freak out a little bit too much, which there's mindset stuff that you can work on and all that type stuff.
Yeah.
But that's kind of seems to be the mark. It's the 10 to 15,000. Anything below that, most people really aren't ready for it. They should be focusing
Okay.
on a lot of other stuff. Like I said, referral partners. They should be focusing on making sure they're Google My Business. So essentially, where your actual website shows up on Google under the maps and everything like that, and the ones that are rated.
Mhm.
Working on that, which is typically pretty easy stuff to do. And then really just local outreach, being inside Facebook groups in your local area,
Yep.
doing that type stuff and working on your systemizing your sales would
Mhm.
be my focus if I'm like sub 10. Because
Mhm.
realistically, at that point, you just don't have enough of a systematic way of bringing new people into your system.
Okay.
Kind of like the analogy you've talked about with the leaky bucket and the water coming through. Like we can't just flood new patients down or new leads down this leaky bucket and expect it to actually retain it all if we don't
Mhm.
have the systems in place.
Yeah. For those clinics, say they're over 15,000 per month, and the owner is still probably treating full time. Maybe they have a little bit of extra time. When you talk to them about what is it when you say sales cycle, what do you
Mhm.
mean by that? Because I'm sure there's plenty of owners out there who are doing just fine. That maybe they have multiple physical therapists on staff and financially things are going okay, but they know that they could do better and they're not achieving, and they want to achieve greater goals, maybe even expand. When you go to them and you say, what is your sales cycle, what exactly do you mean?
So with sales cycle, so you're going to have different sales cycles realistically, depending on where someone's coming from.
Sure.
Because most people, when they're at the 10, 15,000 or below, which even I mean, I've met people who are in the 50,000 and they really don't have systems in place. They just
Exactly.
were there at a good time.
Sure.
And they've been very good with word of mouth. They just get good results. And
Hmm.
over time, they've been able to do that.
That's right.
And so don't get me wrong, like someone who is very established making good money, well, there's a lot of them that don't have good systems in place either.
Exactly.
So that doesn't mean, it's not a slight at anybody who's sub 15 or sub 10. Like that doesn't mean that you're far behind. Like there's people that have still managed to do it. It's kind of in spite of what they have in place, not
Hmm.
because of what they have in place. But when it comes to someone who is, let's say, a referral, or let's say that it's someone that's been a past patient before, they come back in, the sales cycle of that's going to be completely different because it's someone who already knows, likes, and trusts you. You didn't really have to build any type of authority there.
Sure.
And it's really easy to make that sell. That's what 90% of the people who come to me have in place. Is that's
Exactly.
where most of their people are coming from, and realistically that should be where the majority of your patients are coming from if you're
Yeah.
actually doing your job right.
Hmm.
But for someone who actually wants to start to scale and start to actually bring people in who have absolutely no clue who you are, you really have to have different processes in place. And when I say processes, like the way we do ads, so someone actually comes in, they see the ad, it's for like a back pain analysis or back pain eval, whatever you want to call it. They'll give you name, phone number, and email, and then essentially you have to have a full follow-up system to actually get them to call you back.
Yeah.
um, Most people don't have an actual script or any type of framework for their front desk to call, and then they
Hmm.
wonder why that their front desk is saying something different and saying stuff they shouldn't be saying. And a lot of times it's because we found someone who was good at, essentially said that they could answer a phone. They said that they were good at organization, and then expected them to do a job without having the time to actually train them.
Yeah.
And so that's why, like with the way we've done things, we give them scripting, we give them exactly how to get a card on file, which a lot of people don't get a card on file. But typically, from what I've seen, someone who's a referral or someone who like that, you don't really need to bother about getting a card on file.
Hmm.
Someone who knows absolutely nothing about you on a whim opted in. Typically, what we've seen is getting a card on file for a no-show or cancellation, last minute cancellation, pretty much eliminates your no-shows across the board.
Yeah.
It's an awkward conversation to have with your front desk that they have to start doing it, because
Hmm.
typically they're going to feel really uncomfortable. So there's a lot of training that has to go in
For
with that,
sure. Yeah.
because they're going to end up conveying that they're uncomfortable with it, which then makes the actual potential patient uncomfortable. And then it's two uncomfortable people not wanting to share information. And then we wonder why it ends up not, someone actually ends up not scheduling.
That's right.
And so that's the type of stuff that someone needs to have in place. And realistically, a lot of people may not have that in place until they start working with me, and that's
Hmm.
okay.
Hmm.
But then actually, the one of the biggest things is most people just do their evaluations and kind of have a willy-nilly, this is what we do. Like, okay, what's wrong with you? Cool, we can help you. Well, that's okay for someone who already has that authority and trust transferred over.
Exactly.
But someone who has absolutely no clue who you are, you really have to bring them through a systematic sales cycle. So that
Exactly.
way you can actually start to build that trust, find the emotional drivers of what makes them want to actually move forward. And because, like, I like scripts. There's a lot of people who don't like scripts because they say like sales is dynamic. You can't have scripts. Realistically, scripts versus frameworks, like, I don't care what you call it. Like, as long as you understand why you're asking questions in a specific way, it's going to help you overcome a lot of the objections that you typically will
Hmm.
have come up.
Hmm.
Um, like, one of the most simple questions that most people don't bring up is essentially, why now? Why not last week or last month? And so whenever someone at the end says, I need to think about it, you're like, well, I thought earlier you said that you needed to get this done because of XYZ.
Great question.
But if you don't have some of these type questions in place, you wonder, well, I guess all these people just didn't want to do physical therapy. Must have just been someone who didn't care about their health, or must have
Mm,
been someone who just wanted surgery. Well, if you don't have a systematic way of bringing someone through the actual process, you have no way of improving it either.
yeah,
So
I gotcha.
you have to have stuff like that in place. But like I said, people may not inherently have that before they start working with me.
Yeah.
But then they need to at least have a baseline level of patience that come just organically to them. Um, because I think no business should essentially have to live off of Facebook ads alone.
Hmm.
I worked with a client of yours actually,
Hmm.
who right at the start of COVID, every single one of his referral sources
That's,
dried up
yep,
immediately.
exactly.
And so we went crazy on Facebook ad, like spent more than I ever spend on ad spend for like anybody. But that's how we were able to get him through that time,
It's
because
true.
all his referral sources dried up. Is
Hmm.
that something that I want anybody to ever be relying on for forever? No. Like, please do not be 100% reliant on Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg will have you like, I don't know how PC we have to keep this podcast, but you will be very constrained. And when he decides to jack up the price, because we have no control of that,
It's true.
um, then you essentially have no way of actually continuing to grow your business, or at least keeping it stable.
Hmm.
So diversifying and everything like that. And that's why, even like for me, I'm looking at how can we bring Google ads to something, because we need to be looking at Facebook. We need to be looking at Google. We need to be looking at mailers. We need to be looking at literally everything.
Yep.
The issue comes whenever someone either sticks with only one, or they try entirely too many things at once.
Hmm.
You kind of have to find that middle ground of like, okay, this is what's working good. Let's systemize it. Then we can start to look at the other stuff.
Yeah. The sales cycle that you're talking about seems to be heavily dependent in most cases, and correct me if I'm wrong, heavily dependent upon that front desk person. And that it's almost like that's the tipping point. If that person is not, say, doesn't feel comfortable with sales,
Yeah.
because that's essentially what they have to do. If they don't feel comfortable at talking about other people's health related issues,
Yeah.
maybe they're better designed to simply schedule and verify insurance benefits. How do you work with that? What do you recommend?
Uh, I mean, you're definitely right. People do have a lot of barriers for that, because they essentially, nowhere in the job description or any of the expectations when they were hired were they told that you're going to have to sell someone. They were told, all I got to do is call someone. They're going to be so happy to actually get on your schedule. They're never going to have an objection. They're going to be amazing.
Yeah.
Um, Unfortunately, that's not how the real world works. And really, a lot comes down to actually educating them and on the aspect of why it's actually important and why we need to do these things. the best way I've essentially got front desk people, I hate the word front desk people like this. We need a better title for this.
We used to call them patient care coordinators.
Yeah, we'll say customer satisfaction concierge or
There you
something
go.
like that. I don't know. But essentially, talking to them and saying like, hey, like I know that you're not comfortable with this, because you have to acknowledge the fact that they're not comfortable, and saying, okay, if this person was your mother and she's been having back pain for 10 years, all of a sudden she sees this ad and she calls you, what kind of effort would you actually put in to make sure that she actually comes to see you versus going to a surgeon and getting surgery that she doesn't even need? She's going to waste $10,000 worth of her own hard-earned money at a surgeon, still have to come back to you for PT afterwards anyways. How would you feel if, because you didn't actually talk to them, find out a little bit more about them to see like, this is the reason you need to move forward? How would you feel if that was because of you and you didn't take care of your mom? And then when you start to frame it as like you're doing it to help these people versus like we're doing it to try to pull as much money as we possibly can out of them,
yeah,
which realistically, like their salary has to come from somewhere, but that's a whole nother story.
right.
But when you start to come at it from like, we need to learn more about our patients. We need to learn why they tick, how they tick, and how we can better serve them. And it just happens to be that we need to collect and do some sales, and we need to do some of that type stuff. It's just a means to an end. And once you do that, I think there's usually a big dynamic shift. People are naturally going to fall back into that over time, and you have to continue to role play. You have to continue to practice all of that.
It's true.
And especially when it comes to money, like most people are very bad about putting their own opinion of what a high dollar amount is on the potential patient.
That's right.
But I literally had someone today, or yeah, it was yesterday, tell me they had two people come in. One was a social security worker, one was a cashier. Not people who you would inherently think, hey, they can afford $2,000 package worth of treatment. But over time, he slowly started to really relinquish the preconceived notions on who can afford stuff, because realistically, if they're at a point where they want to make a change, they need to make a change, people will find a way.
Yeah.
If I told you that I'm going to repossess your house unless you can come up with 20 grand, you better bet you're going to find a way to make 20 grand. You're going to be begging your family, friends, anything.
Exactly.
So when we start to think of it that way, which I'm not a fan of getting people into debt or anything like that for their stuff, but most people have the money somewhere. They're just not prioritizing it. And sometimes you just have to help them prioritize it.
Well, I love the whole mindset shift and that role playing that you're doing with your front desk person, because it can be very uncomfortable situations for them to just see it from the surface and be like, I'm not built for that, or that's not what I do.
Yeah.
Ultimately, would you say that maybe this is a job that's better suited for a marketing person specifically designated to bring in new patients to your company versus the front desk person who could be very busy?
I think ultimately that's very case dependent from what I've seen, because there's some that that's just inherently what they're good at. Their front desk is very good at making those connections. They don't feel bad about doing it. And there's some that do that, but I do also work with some who they have a dedicated person to call all of their leads, whether that be people who are opted in on a website, Google ads, Facebook ads, all that. And that's their job, because it is very hard to go from one moment talking to someone about insurance verification to then the next moment needing to essentially go into a sales conversation. Like they are two completely different mindsets that you need to be in, and switching back and forth is beyond fatiguing. And for you to be like on that level all the time, like it takes a certain person to want to be able to do that 24/7. But it's not very often I have someone who's truly dedicated only to calling there until they've been working, essentially working with us for quite a while. Because most people are like, let's see if this works first, like before we go and hire someone else. Like, and that's usually how it is. It's like, okay, let's try it. If it works, we'll talk more about everything else. And that's honestly what I recommend for a lot of people. Like, just like we do with tuition, just like we do with school and everything like that, we're willing to drop $5,000 on a semester of physical therapy, not knowing if we're truly ever going to get an ROI out of it,
That's right.
knowing that money's literally just going to go down the drain at some point. Like,
Hmm.
we all know that we've taken plenty of classes that were completely useless when it actually came to being a physical therapist. That's what that was. So if we can then get in our mind, like, maybe we should set aside $5,000, even if for the full year, knowing that some of this money could never come back to us.
Hmm.
Should it not come back? No. But if you start to get in that mindset that some of this money is essentially my tuition for marketing,
Hmm.
then it's going to completely change your mindset, because you know that that's essentially how you learn. Instead of taking a $3,000 course that's by someone, maybe you need to spend $3,000 on Facebook ads. And that's essentially your school of learning.
Hmm.
But there's also people that I know who've tried $3,000 on their own and then just wasted all
Oh
3,000.
yeah.
So it is nice to have that mix of someone who tells you what works and then spend it. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a different train of thought, but I think it's a very beneficial one, that most people have a hard time switching to.
Well, what would you recommend that owners need to consider an appropriate budget, both in terms of money and in terms of time? Because I know that this not all the time is something that, you know, you put the ad out and you get the lead immediately. Maybe
Yeah.
it takes time to get some traction. What would you recommend, whether it's you or with other companies? Should a physical therapy owner expect to spend in the amount of money per month, and also how long should they give it before they say, no, this isn't working, or this is great, we need to keep going?
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on, one, what medium we're looking at. Because for SEO, just immediately assume, so search engine optimization, showing up number one on Google, assume it's going to take you 3 to 6 months at the minimum. Like,
Yeah.
that just doesn't happen overnight. Typically, that's going to be pretty expensive. Most people, in my opinion, outside of just working on their Google My Business, I honestly don't recommend most people starting with that. Because there's ways to make an ROI quicker. So then you can then
Hmm.
start to put money in something like that later on.
I see.
And then kind of going in like order of stuff that's not quite as fast, it would be Google ads after that, because we can't force someone to search something. So there's only so many ways you can actually get people to come to your website to opt in. For there, most people I've seen be fine with about $15 a day, $10 to $15 a day budget on Google Ads.
Okay.
Of course, once you've dialed it in, which it does take some time to dial it in to figure out what words people are searching for, what words you don't want to show up for, because you do end up wasting some money when you first start, because like people search some weird things that you'd never think of. But then the good thing is you can literally take that off the list. You'll never show up for that ad again. And
Hmm.
over time, it's only going to get more and more improved.
Okay.
But Google Ads takes some time to do that. I did Google Ads for probably 6 months or so. It worked, but I just saw Facebook ads had a higher ROI and a
Okay.
faster ROI.
Okay.
I don't think Google Ads should be like something that someone immediately discounts, because I just said that Facebook is a higher ROI. I think that once we get to a point with Facebook ads where it seems like we're really hitting our good stride, we have a consistent way of doing it, there comes a point where your cost per lead gets so much more expensive when you increase your budget too much.
Sure.
So instead of saying, let's just feed everything to Facebook, maybe once we get to that point with Facebook, let's then put the rest of the budget into Google Ads or something like
Okay.
that. So we can
Okay.
diversify, but also keep things efficient.
Hmm.
So with that, that's kind of what I look at as far as budget with that. Facebook ads, most of my guys do $15 a day.
Okay.
That's what I've seen. Like if we're below $10 a day, typically you don't get as much like lead flow to truly make it make sense, in my opinion. Especially if you're working with an agency or you're working with someone, like you have to actually look at the difference. I'll do a quick lesson on essentially relative versus absolute ROI.
Mm.
So essentially what we're looking at, most people think, okay, if I can get a 20-to-1 ROI, that sounds amazing. But there's things you need to think about. So when you're thinking of relative ROI, that may mean you spent $100 on ads, got a 20-to-1 return, so you made $2,000. That's cool and all, but eventually, if you actually want to make money that truly makes a difference, which for some people $2,000 may make a difference, but it's
Hmm.
not enough to hire another PT, it's not enough to hire a front desk, it's not enough
Yeah.
to truly make life changing differences in your business.
Yeah.
So when you think of absolute ROI, that may mean that you start to increase your budget to 500, but maybe you don't become as efficient with it. So instead of
Hmm.
making a 20 to 1 ROI, maybe you're making a 10 to 1.
Hmm.
Well, 10 to 1 on $1,000 ad spend, still $10,000. So you actually
Yeah.
made 10,000, maybe not as good of a ratio there, but you actually
Mm,
made $10,000.
I see.
So a lot of people don't think about that when it comes to their marketing budget. So either they have to overcome expenses of a marketer, or they have to overcome the cost of the actual ad spend. So when you're barely doing enough like that, it's very hard to make it truly even
Hmm.
worth your time
Hmm.
unless you get to a certain budget. And
Yeah.
$15 a day seems to be what I see most people be able to get really good results,
Okay.
not oversaturate their area to where they're constantly having to change their ads like
Hmm.
literally every day. It seems to be a really good sweet spot for most local businesses.
Hmm.
I've got some people that spend 25, 30, just because we've run it long enough. We've seen that where we're able to scale to. Once we got up to like 50, it was like starting to get the cost per lead started driving up.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's like, okay, let's dial that back in, and then let's see where we can allocate that money to somewhere else.
I
Um,
gotcha.
as far as as far as marketing agencies, as far as courses, all that type stuff, there's going to be such drastic ranges. I know people who charge $2,000 a month to do your ads.
Hmm.
Realistically, for Facebook ads alone, for a single location clinic, no one should be charging you 2,000. Like, I love charging what you're worth, and I love a premium, but $2,000, it's not going to make sense for most people.
Yeah.
Um, Typically, when you're actually really looking at someone to truly run your ads, you're looking at about $1,000 a month
Okay.
is what most people will be charging.
Okay.
Um, but like I said, you want to see kind of what that actually entails.
Hmm.
If you're a multi-location clinic, they should be giving you some type of discount as you start to bring on more and more people, or
Yeah.
more and more of your locations.
Yeah.
And as far as time frame of when you can expect like actual start to get results,
Hmm.
Facebook ads, I'd say about 95% of the time we get a lead like within a couple hours of turning it on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like we had one, I think 2 weeks ago. It was like our record. We spent, I think it was 12 cents before we actually got a lead. Um,
Oh, wow.
Now don't take that out of context. That didn't mean we continued to get 12
No,
cent
no, no. I
leads from then
understand.
on. But yes, like, so there's times where it can literally be like within the first hour, you're like, oh dang, someone already opted in. Like, this is awesome.
Hmm.
So someone tells you that Facebook ads, oh, we need to test it for a while. It has to optimize all that. That means that they realistically probably haven't worked with a PT before,
Okay.
or they don't know what offer works.
Okay.
Even for me, like I started working with someone who also offers Pilates.
Mm.
I had never ran ads for Pilates before.
Hmm.
Um, that was something. It took us 2 days before we changed the offers, and we found something that works finally.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but for PT, like, whoever you're working with should have proven ads across pretty much everything. Whether that's like back pain, running analysis, golf swing analysis, like whatever it is, they should have proven ads at this point. Otherwise, you're potentially using your own money for them to test to see what works.
Mm.
Where what
Okay.
you should be paying them for is to expedite that learning curve, because they already actually know what works.
Gotcha.
Um,
Well, that's a good way to also hold them accountable. I mean, because it's one thing to to find the right person to work with, and like you said, you should expect to spend $10 to $15 a day on ads themselves, and then maybe $1,000 per month for someone to manage that and run that for you.
mm,
But if someone's doing it well, you should start seeing leads within the first 48 hours,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
based on what you're saying and the time frames that you're talking about, if someone's going to start their own social media marketing campaign, then from what you're saying, maybe the best way to do that and get some traction immediately is to start with Facebook, start developing that, maybe spend 3 to 6 months or more, maybe honing that in, and then moving on to Google Ads.
yeah.
Is that
So
what you might recommend?
yeah, pretty much the way like the way we do it with our program, we immediately do a text reactivation campaign right out the gate. So we get a list of past patients.
Oh, cool.
We run an offer to them. Typically, you don't have to complicate this stuff, guys. Like
Um,
a free screening to past patients. They already know, like, and trust you. You don't have to do any crazy sales. Like, they're most of the time it's they had something new come up, the same thing that they were having issues came up, or they
Yep.
have a family or friend that now has issues and they say, oh, can my husband use this free screening?
Uh-huh.
The amount of responses you should get to that, which most people just don't understand the tech of how to actually set that up,
Yeah.
which it's pretty straightforward once you actually have the software. Like, it works gangbusters. Like,
Sure.
you should pretty much get anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000 anytime you run one of those. Like,
Nice.
and I think that that's really on the lower end, but a lot depends on how big your list is.
Sure.
But like, even for one of our cash-based guys, he only had 180 past patients, so pretty small list, especially compared to some of your in-network guys.
Yeah.
He made $4,500 with one person who's also continuing essentially visit by visit. So that was package
Nice.
sales collected up front, and then you do visit by visit for the other one. So it's stupid to, like, we need to get, I'm going to go ahead and address this. So most people have a really hard time actually wanting to do a text reactivation campaign. And the
Really?
reason they have that issue is because they feel like they're bothering their past patients. And it has been a very common thing that I've gotten. They're like, oh,
Really?
well, maybe I'll run that later.
Huh?
The amount of people that thank us when we run this, like, thanks for reaching out. Thank you for thinking about me. Like, not
Yeah.
only are you creating goodwill with this, but you're literally going to cover your marketing expenses for a good amount of time just by
Yeah.
running this. And really, you
Exactly.
should be running it at a minimum every quarter.
Exactly.
Like, every quarter. And then after you've gotten used to that, let's start thinking about holiday giveaways. So
Mhm.
Mother's Day's coming up. Let's see, like, if you have a massage therapist, that's a really easy one to do.
Totally.
There's so many ways you can do that. So, like, realistically, you can make tens of thousands of dollars just doing text reactivation. Super easy. If you don't have text, do it via email. Text has a better response rate. Of course, people actually look at their text all the time.
Yep.
I couldn't tell you the last time I looked at my normal email. It probably has 5,000 emails on it. That doesn't mean you shouldn't use email. There's still crazy money to be made using email, but text is significantly better. So as far as priority of how I look at it, it's like text reactivation campaign. Sales, of course, need to be taught within that time period too. Then we go Facebook ads. Once that's systemized, then from there we go to Google ads. And then from there, you can start thinking about SEO. Of course, if you have the time, you can start getting creative with, like, let's have a podcast. So that way we can essentially start to ask all the local businesses, the surgeons, all these people to be on your podcast. Realistically, you don't care who's on your podcast.
Yeah.
It's so you can actually talk with those people for an hour. Like, you need to think of that as far as referral partner building.
That's
you need
cool.
to think of workshops, whether that's at your clinic or whether that's at a running shop or something like that, so you can leverage their audience.
Right.
Like, that stuff needs to be going on, like, pretty much all the time. Maybe not the podcast, but, like, for sure your networking stuff.
Yeah.
Most people don't like it because it's not instant results. But it's stuff that needs to happen. That needs to be your backbone of your business, is referrals and referring partners.
Definitely.
Like, unfortunately, get over yourself, PTs. Go talk to a doctor. Like, don't listen to some of the gurus in the space saying that doctors' referrals are dead. They'll never refer to you. Like,
It's not true.
I know, and I have several clients who make crazy money off of the amount of people that come from doctors.
Yeah.
And even if you're cash based, go to concierge doctors. They're for sure going to do it. Go to massage therapists, go to gyms, go to dentists. Dentists are one of the most untapped referral sources that you could possibly ever get.
Really?
Because they've got patients with TMD, they've got patients with vertigo. So essentially, the person who's the biggest pain in the butt patient, they can't lean back because they get dizzy. They can't open their mouth because they have TMD.
No.
So you're helping them actually fix the patients that they hate seeing.
Yeah.
And pretty much every dentist, dental hygienist, dental assistant have neck, back, shoulder pain from the repetitive bending over. And they're all willing to pay a premium to get it fixed.
Yeah, and they've got a lot of them have carpal tunnel issues. It's a major issue. I know in the dental hygiene space, they talk about it quite a bit.
Yeah. So there's crazy money to be made literally everywhere. Like, as soon as you start to, like, understand more about sales and marketing, your mind just kind of blows up of, like, oh my God, like, which one do I pick?
Like, where do I start? So that's why I'm glad you broke it down, because
Yeah.
there's so many opportunities out there when it comes to getting those referrals and leads in. Like even me as a coach, I'm like, here, try this, try that, try that. So I love
Yeah.
how you broke it down to how, because it's a quicker return in each of those situations, and
Yeah.
that
And
really greased the wheels.
yeah, and I think that that's what, like, really a lot of it comes down to keeping the clinic owner motivated.
Mm,
Because if we don't have quick wins, and even if it's not the clinic owner, it's maybe the PTs.
yeah,
And so someone who's not used to sales, get them some momentum by getting them in for a free screen.
right.
So get them to close 5 or 6 people. And then by the time they get people who are coming in from Facebook, they have a little bit more confidence, because
Mhm.
anybody who's studied sales, anybody who's done sales long enough, the more confidence you have going into that and the mindset that you have going into that is going to make a night and day difference.
Huge.
Where if you had 5 people who told you no, go F yourself, like, and then you have to go into the next thing, like, it's going to be pretty hard to be in the right mindset thinking, this person's going to for sure say yes this time, even though the last 5 pretty much yelled at me. Like,
It's kind of hard.
you have to have that mindset going into it,
Mhm.
and just getting those reps, getting those base hits to where you really start to get some momentum. Momentum can carry a business owner a long way.
Yeah, it could. It would probably be another episode entirely to talk about how to convert leads and stuff like that. So we won't go down that rabbit hole just yet. But when you're talking about sales cycle, I think maybe one of the tougher things, I mean, to get through the front desk and train them is one thing. That then the owner actually has to go further and train the therapists on how
Yeah.
to sell and change that free consultation, which is essentially what you're selling most of the time on the Facebook ads. Am I wrong? Usually it's
Actually,
some kind of consult.
not free. So we don't do free for ours. So
Okay.
our insurance based guys, we go straight to an insurance like paid eval.
Like come in for an
Um,
evaluation.
yeah, they come in for an eval, not a
Okay.
free screen. And then for my cash guys, typically we do a discounted offer. So it's
Oh,
like
okay.
$49 for an evaluation. And then you get them into a plan of care after
Got
that.
it. Yeah. But
Um,
then in that conversation, they have to then sell the entire plan of care past that
mhm,
initial visit, right? And that can
yeah,
be a totally different skill
yeah,
set for your physical therapist that they haven't learned before.
yeah, yeah. And it can be tough for them. But my insurance guys, they typically have an easier job just because most people inherently want to use their insurance.
Sure.
So theirs is easier. Some do have a little bit harder time, like going like from the $49 to a full cash package or something like that,
Hmm.
especially when your pricing's high.
Yeah.
And maybe they haven't done that as often. I will say that most cash PTs probably shouldn't hire. This is me as a new grad. I just graduated in December.
Oh,
Most should not hire a new grad for a cash based clinic to start with.
hmm.
Because from my standpoint, what I see as a new grad, I'm still seeing if I can even get them better. Like, I'm freaking out, like, what's the
Exactly.
next special test I need to do? What's the next, like I don't remember the range of motions anymore. Like, is
Right.
this normal? Like, and then while you're simultaneously trying to think about, we need to go through these questions, we need to know how to overcome these objections, we need to know how to essentially future pace these people, whatever it may be. Like, I may be one of the unicorns that actually understand sales as a new grad,
Hmm.
but most people who I went to school with and most new grads that I know, like, it should not be what they should be focusing on. I think that they need to get some more experience under their belt before they're trying to do cash. I think that they could be fine doing it in a in network clinic.
Mm,
But it even then, like, I would probably still give one of your more experienced PTs, the people who are coming in from Facebook or Google,
sure.
and then give the newer grad the person who are referrals and that type of stuff, just
Got
to
it.
once again build their confidence that they can even get them better. It's hard to
Sure.
sell $2,000 package when they don't even know if they can deliver on it.
Right.
Like,
Right.
that's
Understood.
a big mindset thing as well.
So, and really quickly, if you were to if an owner were to assess the success of their conversion rates, I know we're coming up against the time that we have together today, but if what would be a typical expectation in terms of leads to, bought in full plan of care, has signed up for 12 visits, whatever.
So I've seen a difference between my cash guys and my insurance guys. But the rough back of the napkin numbers that I tell people is expect 50% drop off at every point of friction. So
Okay.
let's say we have 100 people who opt in. Half of those people will probably drop off at the phone call when you try to get them scheduled.
Okay.
And then from there, half of them will actually get to come in for their visit.
Actually show up.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so because realistically, like if you get them on the phone, all you're really doing is collecting a card for a no-show fee. Like that is not a hard sell. Like most people should be able to do that. And once you have a card on file, your no-show rate just completely pretty much goes away.
Right.
You may have like 5% of people who want to cancel last minute or something like that.
Okay.
But that's kind of what I tell you is 50% and 50%. So pretty much 25% across the board. So
Okay.
let's say you have 100, you can get 25, depending on your actual sales ability, how good your staff is for actually calling people. But I mean, I have some people who convert closer to like a 35, 40%. And then I've had people who we've had to get front desk fired, unfortunately, that were closer to about at 9%. Luckily, the one that was at 9% had ridiculous lead volume, so it still was profitable.
That's cool.
But that's not always the case. So like you have to know your numbers. And that's the good thing about really tracking this stuff and having a software that's able to track every single step of it. Like within our software, we can see lead. We actually schedule a phone call back time because we saw that when people actually had to call these people, they're constantly at work, they're constantly not answering. And it was just too much work on the front desk. So it goes lead to phone appointment scheduled. And then from there, it's okay, did they answer? Did they not answer? So we have essentially a column for every single one of these.
Oh, that's cool.
Did they come for the eval? Did they actually close on the eval? You can assign how much money was made at each one of these. So you can actually go back on there, see what was actually paid from the insurance companies.
Yeah.
So you can actually see like we spent X amount of dollars, we got X amount of dollars.
Great.
Because don't let the companies sell you on, oh yeah, it's 10 times ROI. They're only talking about ad spend, not their actual fee that you're paying them, and wondering like, oh, well, my bank account's not going up for some reason, even though we're making a 20 to 1 ROI.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So it's definitely, you have to track it for sure.
Yeah. There's so much more we could talk about, I'm sure. But for the purpose of the episode, you shared a ton of great information. And I think any owner that's looking at stepping into the social media space or is currently in it and is feeling kind of gray, feeling really fuzzy about what should I expect and what should I do, I think you really provided a lot of clarity. To wrap things up, is there anything else that you might want to share before we sign off?
I think like you said, we covered a lot. There's always more to cover when it comes to sales, nurturing, everything that needs to be in place there. But yeah, I mean, I think realistically is really take the leap. I think people underestimate how powerful marketing is. As much as I am a fan of tracking, I think there's even an exponential amount that actually comes back to you that there's no possible way for you to ever track. I mean, that's Grant Cardone, one of the biggest sales and marketing guys ever. He pretty much says like, I can almost guarantee you for every dollar I put in, there's going to be some money coming back that I cannot track. And it's always going to be better. If I have some extra money laying around, put it in marketing. And I'm not just saying that because that's my job. I've seen it. I know it, how it works. And it is a mindset that you really have to overcome. But the sooner you do that, the sooner you'll be able to systematically grow your business and not worry about constantly, will someone refer to me? Or worry about the next pandemic that comes that shuts down your one big source. So definitely just being open to it, but also keeping whoever you're working with accountable. So that way you can for sure know that your money's going in the right place. Got it.
Cool. Well, thanks for your time today. Really appreciate it. A ton of great information. Like we said, if people wanted to get in touch with you specifically, Joey, how'd they do that?
So you can either friend me on Facebook. So it's Joey Albritton, or you can, join my Facebook group. It's PT Marketing Secrets. Or if you want to email me, it's ptmarketingsecrets@gmail.com. Maybe one of these days I'll grow up and actually get a big boy email account that says Joey@PT Marketing Secrets. But it's worked so good for now. So we'll focus on the things that actually bring ROI to people.
That's right. That's right. Well, I love the information that you shared today, and hopefully people get in touch with you and reach out, because like I said, I think the pandemic has kind of forced our hands to go in this direction, but it's a natural progression that we have to take, because I know one of Paul Goff's big things that I loved that he said in his podcast was a lot of us are trying to fight over that 10% of people that get referred for musculoskeletal care, when there's 90% more that have musculoskeletal issues that we should be reaching out to, and we're not doing it effectively and efficiently because people are still confusing us with massage therapists. So if we can do that and really push that into the direct to consumer space, I think we'll be fighting over a much bigger piece of the pie and all grow together.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one thing that a lot of people don't do is go talk to the physical therapist that works right down the street from you. Like, we're all so worried that we're competition. Like, the amount of marketers that are literally trying to do the exact same thing as me, like, go talk to the people who are in your business, go talk to the chiros, go talk to the PTs, because our competition is not each other. It's Netflix. It's whatever is essentially stealing their attention. So they're not actually taking action and getting their stuff solved.
That's right.
So the sooner we can leverage each other's experience, the sooner we can leverage each other's relationships, everybody's going to finally start getting the care from PTs that they should be getting, versus everything either just sitting there not getting help or going to surgeons that they don't need to.
That's right.
So
that's right. Cool, man. Well, thanks for your time today. I really appreciate it, Joey.
Yep. Thanks for having me, man.